Hello, and I will be talking about the general project from Eurovent, working on recommendations for product category rules. And the reason that these guidelines are needed is that without them, LSA consultants will be doing things differently. Usually it's in good faith, but in the end they will be making different assumptions, they will be using different methods, and in turn also the results will differ. And for that reason, we need harmonized guidelines to make sure that the things are done the same way and that you have credible EPDs. If you ask me, this will only become more relevant going forward because of the EU regulations that are coming in place, and that will increase the demand for EPDs even further. So why did Eurovent decide to get engaged in this work? That was to support the standardization work we have heard about from Amund and Tobias, and also in the end to work for a more sustainable industry. The Eurovent members have the needed technical key insights about the products and about the value chains that are necessary to make guidelines that are sensible, as we have also heard about. And in the end, it's also their members who are going to use the results in the end. The project was quite elaborate, and it started with a general training and awareness raising among the members to make sure that they have the needed prerequisites to go into what I would say is a pretty technical work. So we conducted some training to make sure that they understand the differences between LCA methods, that they understand how to ensure good quality and what is best practice in LCA. The second activity was mapping the current landscape of LCAs and rules, because it's not like there aren't any rules already, there are multiple. So we need to consider those and make sure that it's harmonized and properly aligned with what exists and with the basic standards, with the aim to identify those things that are inconsistent and the areas that are in need of harmonization. There were a lot of meetings among the members. There were many discussions, lots of good arguments, and in the end, the result is an agreed on recommendation for vexillation units and for air filters. And these recommendations have also been tested on real products in a pilot study. And I believe that is a good way to validate that they work in practice and to also make needed adjustments based on the learnings from those pilot projects. The recommendations would be published, and you can access the model for ventilation units. I believe you have a link in the presentation if you need to see it. In this slide, you can see all the members that actively participated in the project. And I have to say that it was my impression that they were really committed to this work and also committed to getting to a fair result. There were lots of discussions. There were plenty of disagreements along the way because it's complicated issues. But in the end, I believe that the discussions were constructive and the end result was agreed on. So that was a pleasure. The Eurovent work with product category rules does not end with ventilation units or air filters. And the next product categories in line have already been started up. It is about commercial refrigeration equipment, and it's about air conditioners, rooftop units, chillers, and heat pipes. I'm confident that there will also be lots of issues and things to figure out with these product categories. but also hopefully we can have some learnings from the previous project that will make this easier. And for sure, I will do my best to make sure that the result is also aligned, so that for all the different type of equipment, there is a harmonization in the way things are done. Now I would like to give a few examples of what was the content of these recommendations. Tobias has already explained some of it, but I think it can still be repeated. The first examples here are about air filters, and this issue that we face today, where LCA practitioners usually calculate per piece of product, resulting in a need for multiple EPDs for the same product if it comes in different sizes. In fact, I believe you said there was thousands of EPDs that it can be for one company, which obviously makes it not a viable way of communicating environmental impacts. So this way of defining reference sizes and changing the units is pragmatic, and also the end result will be representative for all the products that are covered. Second example, Tobias has also explained about the actual purpose of the air filter, which is to clean the air. And the reason that I bring it up as well is to highlight that an EPD is actually more than a calculation of climate change and global warming, CO2. So it's actually a long line of environmental impacts, as we also have air pollution, we have soil pollution, water pollution, resource consumption, etc. And this is an example of an area where products can also improve the environment. Last but not least, a number of things have been dealt with by making some harmonized default scenarios, and that is practical for product issues that are the same for all. And I believe that with regards to how this type of equipment is dealt with after the end of its useful life, when they have to be discarded, it's practical to have a default scenario. And the recommendation ensures that for the same product, every manufacturer, everybody will assume the same things with regards to how they are dealt with at the end of life. I've also brought some examples that relate to the ventilation units. And the first one is about the lifetime of the ventilation system. And actually, this is very important. It doesn't necessarily show in the results of the EPD, but at a building level, it can double or even triple the results. So it is very important what's assumed. And without these guidelines, we can see that the assumptions vary a lot and the references vary a lot. So in this project, there were a lot of discussions and the manufacturers brought their knowledge. We compiled all the existing sources of information and in the end agreed on recommending some default values for residential and also for non-residential units. The reason these are different is that typically the residential ventilation units have a shorter lifetime, not necessarily because they're worse, but also because of the way they're used, how often they are serviced, and how many hours they're on per day, many other factors that influence it. Next topic is actually where we have had the most discussion, and for good reasons, because the energy consumption in the use stage is very important for the resource. Typically, it exceeds the entire remaining life cycle by many times. So that is important, and the challenge is that you cannot calculate it for a product and then know what is the energy consumption, because that depends on the specific building where you put the ventilation unit. And there are lots of use factors that influence here. It could, for example, be the size of the room. It can be how many hours do you turn it on. And yeah, many other factors influence the energy consumption. But in the end, we agreed on one default scenario for residential ventilation units, which is based on a solid reference from the EU Eco-Design regulation. So I believe you cannot find a more acknowledged source for making a default scenario, and it's transparent. So if you have two EPDs based on that, at least you will know that it's the same assumptions, and you'll be able to know which assumptions it is. When that is said, I have to stress that for specific buildings, you should never use the default scenario, because it will be wrong. So you should consider the specific building and what applies there. And to that end, Eurovent has developed an LCC tool, which you can access via the link in the slide. And with this tool, it's possible to calculate the energy consumption under the more specific circumstances for specific buildings. And I'm sure, Laurent, that you can say a lot more about that, so I would like to give the word to you.